Welcome back to the Power of Perspective, the talk show with Shawn and BJ. My name is Shawn.
My name is BJ Tench.
And we are, as always, very appreciative to be allowed to share these moments of your life with you. It is really important for us to come up with topics and titles of our shows that really increase awareness and promote wise decision making. And today I do believe that we have another topic that not only is it, I think, intriguing, but it's very important, especially for the times. And the question that we're going to be exploring today is, what happened to decency and tact? What happened to decency and tact? And we're going to be looking at some of the previous decades, current decades, and just exploring those particular aspects from a depth perspective. So one of the reasons, BJ, why I wanted to talk about this and why I'm so passionate about it is because, it just seemed, I remember in the 90s, they would tell us that we've never seen, like older people would say, man, we've never seen a generation of kids like y'all, right? And that's true. The 90s was it was a new time. I think that it was the beginning of the death of decency and tact. You had gangster rap, you had gangs, gang violence was kind of like at an all-time high. For the first time, I think, in recent history, maybe for the first time in documented history, I think parents really didn't know how to respond to a more aggressive temperament in children. So it was a very interesting time. Interestingly, I think that the past generations have taken the torch and exacerbated things, and I mean, it's just gotten worse and worse and worse over the course of the past 15 to 20 to 25 years. And sometimes I think I'm looking at, like, I'm an alien, man. You and I have both contributed. We were both involved in some of these inappropriate behaviors in the 90s and the 2000s, 2005s, because no home, BJ and I both come from a solid home, two-parent home, but nobody's home is immune to the street life, to negative attitudes and behaviors. And even though we were perpetrators of that at time, I don't think it was to the extent that we are seeing today and that we saw in the past either. And the reason why I say that, man, is it just seems like it's okay to lack decency. It's okay to lack tact. It's okay. TV's changing. There are customers on family channels now that weren't around in the 90s. And there was probably stuff in the 90s that wasn't around never our mom and dad was growing up, but it just seems like the things that I'm seeing, like, that are being allowed at the school level, at the community level, on TV, it's just like nobody thinks that this is a problem. So one of my first questions for you is, when you hear the question, what happened to decency and tact, what are some things that come to your mind, both as a developmental or as a character development coach, and also just as BJ?
Well, one of the things that comes to mind for me, Shawn, is a couple shows ago we had talked about terminology.
Yes.
And when you hear the word decency, you think of the word decent.
Yes.
Nowadays, when you're talking to any man or woman and you're asking about their physical stature when you're having just a regular conversation, and some of this is locker room talk for some of our viewers out there, some of this is street talk, but they can all relate to what I'm about to say. You've heard people say, well, how does she look, or how does he look? And the person will say, oh, they're decent.
Right.
Well, what the heck is decent?
Right.
So what's your terminology of decent?
Right.
So when I hear the things like decency, that's the first thing I thought of was, well, first of all, people are probably using the word decent in their own form of fashion. What the heck does decent mean to you? I heard you say a couple shows ago, you don't look at people as good and bad. So, that's the first thing. Who are you talking to when you talk about decent?
Great point.
So when I think of decency, I think of that. Now, as far as what you were just talking about with the 90s, I think of time frames. I think of substitutes. What I mean by time frames and substitutes is, for substitutes, our parents growing up in the 70s and the late 60s, they wrote love letters. Words meant something. Diaries, journals, our generation, and we probably are telling our age here, was the AOL stage.
Oh, the AOL stage.
You write an info.
Yes.
You talk about your away message.
Right.
And we thought that was crazy. You
Right.
know, our parents used to say, you putting up, you got to go to the bathroom. You putting up, BRB, be right back.
Right.
You putting up,
Right.
you know, got to change my clothes. Or,
Right.
you know, guys who might have played Pee-wee sports, you know, got to get changed, got to put my pads in. It would be just a little small thing like, I'll be right back. And there would be a list of people that could view that. Well, you know, you think of things like that, like, well, nowadays, they could just put everything out in the open.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I'm very hard on the youth sometimes to a fault. But then I have to take time to reflect and remember, well, hey, there was a time that our parents was looking at us like,
Exactly.
let me read that info again.
Exactly.
And for all you young folks out there that's looking at the view, info was basically your thoughts, your views, your do's, your don'ts. ASL, which was age, sex, and location.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
all of that would be in just one, you know, small paragraph to 2-paragraph explanation of who you were.
Mm.
So I'm sitting there thinking about decency, and I'm saying that, you know what's crazy? I'll take that. Because even back then, that was a personal thing. Everybody couldn't get to know you that fast.
Okay.
You know, there had to be a box that came up, a gray box,
Okay.
that you had to accept.
Okay.
Nowadays, it's like there is no care, there is no sense of a warning, of, you know, like letting everybody know. I feel like there should be some type of privacy, like don't you care about, you know, who you are conversating with? So when I think of decency, I'm thinking of, you know, that has to be taught in the home.
Yeah. Yes.
What exactly is decency?
Yes. Yes.
What do you view as decent? Because somebody's decent could be just the fact that, you know what, I'll change my underwear, you know, twice a week. That's decent. In my household, nah, that's not gonna fly.
Yeah.
So, you know, I hope I'm not, you know, talking too long, Shawn, but
No.
that is my definition of decency. And what was your other question, sir?
Well, I want to touch on that. I think that you brought up a fabulous point, because when you talk about how, you know, there was AOL and how you could put up, you know, different messages. I do remember. I think, you know, it was like high school, college days for us.
Mm-hmm.
But it was still, even though I do agree with you in the sense that you say, you know, you're okay with that more than maybe some of the elimination of barriers today.
Thank you.
I still, in one of the ways where I kind of disagree in the sense that it was still a broadcasting of like personal information, maybe in a way that didn't need to be broadcasted. Trust me, we enjoyed AOL back in the day. You know what I'm saying? Like, so one of my points is too, is that one, I still think that it was similar. It had a similar effect as a Twitter, as a Facebook, and all that. It wasn't to the extreme, but it was still a broadcasting of like personal information, maybe in a way that was had a tad bit of inappropriateness. But since we are so young, we really didn't care. Which takes me to my second point, is that at that age, you know, it's developmentally appropriate. And it's unfortunate that, you know, even in counseling, some people will come into counseling and the parents will say, well, my son is doing X, Y, and Z, he's having sex, or my daughter's having sex, or they're looking at porn, X, Y, and Z. And unfortunately, even as we work through those behaviors, we have to talk to the parents and say, look, this is developmentally appropriate. You know, even though it may be developmentally appropriate, BJ, or excuse me, it may be developmentally appropriate, there's still an aspect of it that is dangerous to the person, to the family, and also to the world at large. So I just think that we have to weigh the pros and cons. And to your other point, man, there's also something like there's this thing called triangulation, right? Where you have the hero, you have the perpetrator, and you have the victim. So in any given situation, triangulation says that, like, if you scream at me, right, you're the perpetrator, I'm the victim, and then I call Facebook and social media the ultimate hero. You know what I mean? It's like, oh man, I go on Twitter like, man, these dudes really don't really know what I'm capable of, or these dudes X, Y, and Z. Why people gotta be all, you know, tough and stuff like that? Sin. And then I'm broadcasting to the world what I should be talking to you about. My issues with you, but instead of dealing with my issue to you, I go to social media. So I mean, you just bring up so many points. And when you talked about home, man, I've been so repugnant with the lack of decency, the lack of respect, and the lack of tact that I've actually started doing some research, and I actually found that Cornell University released some literature about the power of the dining room, right? The dining room. This is fascinating to me. We talk so much about how people don't eat dinner no more. There's actually research that says that there's a correlation between family meals, like family mealtime, since it dated back to the beginning of time, obviously, but the Middle Ages. There's a correlation between family mealtime and social norms, social boundaries, social structure, demeanor, interpersonal skills, and all this. So one of the things I believe is that as people started to like stop eating so much together as a family, as the dining room kind of went away symbolically, so did tact, decency, and respect.
And like I said a little earlier, substitutes. So what's in the way of eating at the dining room table now?
Good, great question.
The baby girl has a cell phone or an iPod or some type of tablet. You know, us as fathers, we do have cell phones. We're not dinosaurs.
Right.
The wife or the girlfriend or the significant other, she has a cell phone. And, you know, and obviously the kids have cell phones, you know, from probably the ages, and I hope I'm not telling anybody's household, from ages of maybe 9 and up, somebody has a cell phone, especially if you have them teenagers.
Right.
So there's substitutes, which comes back to decency. You know, when we was coming up, if the phone rang, and this is probably not just my household, I'm sure there's plenty of viewers out there, you didn't have to answer that house phone call. We're all eating. There's something, I believe, that's almost indoctrinated in our bodies that when the phone rings or when that text goes off or, you know, when there's a message from IG, if you're eating, you happen to look down. So you get captivated in the moment, almost like a deer in the headlights.
Yeah.
Those are substitutes.
Wow.
So my thing is big on time frames. You know, there's a time and a place for everything, as we were just talking off camera. Yeah. And that starts in the developmental stages when they're younger. Explaining to them, you know, when you wake up, I'm not saying that we're creating robots, because we do want our children to be, we want them to be themselves. We're not trying to, independent. We're not trying to make them some type of robot. Yeah. But there's time frames. You know, when you wake up in the morning, you know, when we was coming up, there was, you know, there was the Whammos, there was whatever you listen to, Wild 108, whatever. Yeah. You listen to music. You know, there's a certain type of music that gets the tempo, that gets your blood flowing. Well, nowadays, they got the hottest topics. They got music. They got it all in one. Yeah. And sometimes maybe they have a smorgasbord of different media outlets, and they're on overload. You know what I mean? It would be like if metaphorically speaking, if the phone was like a food, you already have too many carb intake. You're ready to explode before you even walk through that metal detector. So again, what comes back to decency? Are you overflowed? Are you overfed with different, whether it's good or bad, negative thoughts, or more important, all these people's opinions? You done heard 65 different soap operas before you even go into school, from Facebook, from IG, from Twitter. Those are all soap operas. Back in the day, you know, you didn't watch soap operas until maybe 4 o'clock, and in some households, you wasn't watching. That's grown folks' business. True.
I come home from school, my mom watching Days of Our Lives.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, that's just, but nowadays, those soap operas from, and you know, I'm not coming at anybody in particular, the Love and Hip Hops, the Empires, all of that, you can get what happened last night on Power on your phone.
Right.
On Facebook. And they can spoil it for people who actually enjoy watching. It's like, dang, why you tell me that?
Right.
But with that being said, there's time frames. And I just feel like sometimes you can have too much information. It can be almost like an overload.
Man, well, with that said, I want to definitely touch back on that whenever we come back from our break, because I have something that I want to put with that. So don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with the Power of Perspective, the talk show with Shawn and BJ. Welcome back to the Power of Perspective, the talk show with Shawn and BJ. We are talking about, or we are exploring the question, what happened to tact, decency, and respect? And before the break, BJ has so elegantly brought up, you know, the idea of how, you know, there are time frames and things of that nature that really can affect households, families, people, which then also affects the global culture. And what you actually caused me to think about is, you know, because BJ actually talked about some of the impacts of social media, and I also want to put in there like music as well, right? Music in particular and social media gets a really bad rap today because it gets blamed for, you know, putting so much negativity, as you were saying, like on the people and giving them so much information. However, when we look back, I think, you know, what our research was like the Middle Ages. I want to go back to the dining room table, because the dining room table and just the dining room in itself, I believe, started to be built and incorporated into the architecture of households around like the Middle Ages, which is like 476 to I think like the middle 1500s. So we didn't even necessarily according to this research I read, even see dining rooms until that particular time, right? Now, here's why I bring that particular aspect up. Whenever you started to take away that and the impact that it had, you know, families at that time would be able to combat some of these things that you're talking about. You know what I mean? When I was sitting at the dinner table with my dad, he would always say, "We don't do that. We don't do that. You know, you might do that with your friends, but we don't do that in this house." It was a constant, daily, every evening, and throughout the course of the day, these messages that were being implemented into my mind that were combating social media and AOL, that were combating peer influence, that were combating music. So once again, think about today, BJ. I'm talking about the power of the dining room and the dining room table, and how research says, again, I want to keep reiterating that, research says that there is a correlation between family mealtime and social constructs, social behavior, right? That's just so powerful to me, because people are still buying dining room furniture. They're investing in dining room furniture, but how many people are investing in dining room behavior? How many people are investing in the family use of the dining room? You go into so many households now, and like the dining room is kind of like just, it's not even used. People got their clothes up on the dining room table, got plastic over it. They'll tell you, "Oh, we don't use that room." And I'm guilty of it. Me and my family, we don't necessarily use the dining room table, but we have a table in the kitchen, so we eat there. We still have dining room behaviors. So one of the things that I'm saying is, I'm trying to push the idea that there's a possibility that even though what you're saying is correct, the power of social media, music, and all of that, which gets a bad rap, we still got to take a look at the family and what the family is not doing.
Oh, yes.
You know what I'm saying? Because as the dining room behaviors kind of went away, I believe that has a big impact on why we're seeing less tact, less respect, and less morality, and less decency. Your thoughts?
Oh no, I couldn't agree with you more, Shawn. I mean, you said it best. At the dinner table, you know, I also grew up with a father, a strong father. There's certain things that you don't talk about, and you know, I can't help myself but to put it out there. There's a scene in the movie The Godfather, Part 1, where, and I don't condone necessarily their lifestyle, but they were about to talk about business, and their business obviously was organized crime. One of the brothers says, hey, we don't talk about that at the dinner table. And even in something like that, where the energy is so negative, so glorifying gangsters, you can understand that scene when it comes to, you know, we don't talk about that. I'm sure that there are athletes, I'm sure that there are entertainers. Look, man, when we come home and we dine, and it's called the dining room, when we dine and when we hang out, you know, we don't need to talk about necessarily my job. We want to talk as a family. There's a healthy balance. You know, what did you do today? What did the son do? What did the daughter do? Exactly. The reason why maybe, and you know, I'm about to possibly combat what you're saying about the media. A lot of reason why people aren't using their furniture is because they're so busy watching who has the better furniture on VH1, right. Who has the better furniture on you know, the Home Buyers channel. They have a channel now that shows different ways to set up your dining room. And again, I know this because I'm not totally a dinosaur yet. I might be on my way there. You know, I have to decide whether I'm gonna be stuffed or frozen. I'm not totally a dinosaur yet, but I'm aware that there are channels like that show, you know, this is the way you want to set it up. And it's not a woman thing or man thing, it's a person thing. Right. Everybody wants what they don't have. Right. Because guess what? A dining room table could be just a regular table with cloth on. I grew up in my grandma's house too, where it was just a cloth, and that was just a place that we talked. You know, there was no time to really be talking about television and things like that. It was just straight talk. Whether you're talking about some spiritual things going on in your life, shortcomings, whether we're talking about grades, all of that is and was effective, and it can still be effective today, because I do believe viewers are going to take something from this show today, and even if they sit back and think, yeah, we don't even use our dining room table.
Exactly.
And I'm not nitpicking, because here's the thing. You know, you have a lot of men who might think that that's soft, and then you have a lot of women who are part of the new age where, you know, they're like, you know, we don't do it this way. We do it this way. I don't feel like cooking. Or, you know, whatever reason they may combat your comment for saying to sit down. But it's not about the food. It's not about keeping up with whatever family you want to plug in there that might be on your favorite television show. It's the power of communication also.
Right.
Getting your frustrations out. Getting, you know, planning for tomorrow. There's a lot of communication barriers because you're not even planning. You know, a team that's the most successful plans. And the family is the first team you're supposed to be taught how to play with.
Right. You know, that dining room table is just so powerful for reasons that you just said, and for reasons that I've said, and for other reasons as well. Because, you know, you have brought up a point that, you know, people may try to combat. Totally okay. We live in a day right now, and this is actually what the research that Cornell had researched, they had released said. We live in a day where cooking shows kind of at an all-time high. Yet and still, people really ain't using the dining room table. And actually, it says that people eat their breakfast in their car, their lunch at their desk, and dinner, you know, they eat that just wherever they can sometimes, right? So, you know, but we still have all of these cooking shows. Where you cooking at? But there's also now, we also have to separate caste as well, because, you know, low socioeconomic status, the middle class, and then the aristocrats, there are different behaviors. There are different behaviors. But like you said, you know, people are starting to do more of this to the point where I'm kind of saying that when you look, I think that what I had researched was that the 60s and the 70s were kind of one of the last decades for families kind of eating together as families, and when the 80s and 90s came, we started to see that go away a little bit. However, with that stated, what are some of the differences in the behaviors then versus now?
The substitutes with time frames, I believe. You know, I had touched on that at the very beginning of the show. Time frames and substitutes. In the morning, you know, you have your music, you get ready for whether you're going to work or for the kids, you're going to school. I said this earlier, and I'm going to say it again. You know, there was certain type of music that, you know, our parents didn't necessarily care for.
Right.
So, you know, they're going to say, you know, can you turn that down? You know, can you respect the house? You know, you don't need to be listening to 3 6 Mafia or the Locks right now. You're on your way to school. Period. But at least they were able to hear it.
Yeah, right.
You know, there was a time frame for that.
Right.
And then by the time you come after school, whether you're involved in some type of athletics or some type of curricular activity, some type of club, you came home, you had your snack, or, you know, for some kids, they just came home and crashed and took a nap. There was time frames. And I'm not trying to promote people being programmed. There's a time and place for everything. I feel like with social media, everything is put all in one. And to a certain degree, like I said before, like an overload, you could look at it in this way. It's just all wrapped up in one. If it was a wrap, it's just too much food, it's just going to explode. Some people's wraps, some people's walking around with a heavy wrap and they can't even, you know, you can't even digest that. It's too much to digest. Whereas where another person might, you know, actually have a balance, and they may, you know, have room for later. Everything should be done in moderation. I'm not trying to tell our viewers that they should not be, you know, involved in social media, because you got social media.
Right.
I mean, a lot of my friends and family, they have social media. I have social media.
Right.
But there's a time and a place, and more important, that needs to be taught in the home.
In the home. And, you know, to your point, and I want to transition. I actually do want to start talking a little bit more about the music, because I've also been like thinking over the past several years that you can even hear a difference in the content of the music, like for, you know, like since the 60s. So, you know, based on what you're saying right now, I do think that, you know, I'm not sure if I can confidently say, but also I wasn't born during this time. I wonder how much an influence music did or did not have on families, let's say back in the 60s, versus the impact that they have now. Maybe families were so strong then that maybe music had to be more honest. Maybe music had to be more tactful because they respected the power of the family. But now it seems to have switched to where the music has a lot of the power now, and it doesn't have to respect the power of the family because the family has been broken up so bad that the music can do whatever it wants. But I wanted to read something to you, man, and to the viewers, right? I've been thinking about this just for so long now, and as you hear song titles, as you hear song lyrics, I just want to read, a couple different songs from the 60s up until the 2000s, just to highlight how the tact and decency has really started to go away. And BJ, please feel free to chime in at any point, because some of this is funny. All right, so in 1963, we could have went back farther, but I chose the 60s. So in 1963, you had Jack Jones with Wine and Lovers. It was a very crafty song about being promiscuous. He was talking about stuff that, let's say a Future would talk about today. Trey Songz is a better example, but it was very crafty and it was tactful. You knew what he was talking about, but he wasn't cursing. He wasn't saying anything that was inappropriate, but he was talking about the same stuff that Trey Songz might say. 1966, you had Lou Christie with Lightning Strikes. Again, another very tactful song. I've only heard these songs as a result of researching them. Most of these songs on this list I do like. Those two songs, I only heard about those, within the recent past. But again, a very crafty song, very tactful. 1967, you had Aretha Franklin with You Made Me Feel Like a Natural Woman. That song's about sexuality. But it was tactful, it was decent. She wasn't up in there, sounding like, and again, I'm not disrespecting Cardi B or Nicki Minaj, but there's a difference between a Cardi B and a Nicki and Aretha Franklin. But Aretha was still talking about sexuality. 1973, BJ, we had Marvin Gaye with Let's Get It On. I mean, what more can you say? 1974, we had Patti LaBelle with Lady Marmalade, which is interesting because I think that I researched that the Oule Voule, whatever it is, I'm not sure how it goes, but
some of our viewers, y'all know, you heard it before.
Apparently, they had to change the lyrics because at the time of that day, it couldn't be publicized on or broadcast on TV. Yep. Because I think that it translates to "Come Sleep With Me Tonight," right? So it was inappropriate for TV for that day. However, today that's basic. So look at the difference between what was appropriate in the 70s versus what is appropriate today in 2017. We'll keep moving. Rod Stewart with "Tonight's the Night." He had a song lyric that went, "Spread your wings and let me come inside you." You had Anita Ward with "You Can Ring My Bell." You can ring my bell. We did some bell ringing back in our. We wasn't calling it that, but we did some bell ringing. Rick James, "Give It To Me, Baby" in 1981. In 1983, you had the SOS Band. "I don't care about them other girls, just be good to me." And I always felt like that.
What year was that?
That was 1983.
Now see that I want to stop right there.
Okay, let's stop.
I don't care. Could you read that one more time? SOS Band.
The SOS Band, 1983. I don't care about. I love that song too. Love it. "I don't care about those other girls. Just be good to me."
Now it's funny because 1983 is 2 years before both of us was born.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of men now who have very promiscuous lives, and if they could, they would live as polygamous as they could. But the problem is, a lot of the women that are in their circles, they understand that, they have multiple women.
Yeah.
And I used to actually combat and argue with, both in the high school setting as well as college, like, he got multiple girls. And you know what they're saying? You know what their combat would be? You know what their comeback would be? I mean, I know that, but he's good to me.
Oh, man.
Or he gives me this and that.
Man.
So right there, a lot of children, us 80s kids, was probably conceived in some type of spiritual way to that type of lingo. Them type of lyrics right there.
And this is what I'm saying. Like, when you talk about time frames, bruh, when you talk about time frames, like, look at how we're getting more promiscuous the closer we get to the 90s, right? And blatantly promiscuous, right? So that was 1983. And who knows, like, to me, that was kind of like probably like maybe a time where like and again, you might have had people thinking about this stuff in previous decades, but it wasn't appropriate to really come out and say it. In 1987, I love this song. It was by George Michael, "Prosper in the Next Life." "I Want Your Sex. I Want Your Sex." How much more blatant can you get? 1991, you had "Color Me Bad." "I Want to Sex You Up." Now, when the 90s came, if you hear what's going on now, the closer we get to the 90s, it's like, it's right. No more tact. No more trickery. No more funny rhetoric.
Punching you right in the
mouth.
Can I stop you right there?
For
1991. Again, if you hear the title of the group, color me bad. People like my grandmother and my great aunts and uncles, they would stop you right there. The door, Hope, say the name of the group again. Color Me Bad.
Color Me
And
Bad.
I actually like that song. I want to sex you up. I mean, it got played a lot.
Yeah.
But again, we were what, 6 years
6
old
years
at that
old,
time?
man, 6 years old.
No, that didn't come on at just a certain time. That came on at 10:30 in the morning.
Right.
It came on at 9.
Right.
I used to hear that song being played on In Living Color. In the background, subliminal messaging. That type of music was being played at the Steeler games, at the Pirate games. You know, in between innings when guys was doing grounders and pop-ups, you hear that song playing and you see girls jamming. And I'm 6 years old, but now looking in hindsight, as we're talking about this segment,
Yeah.
it's pretty blatant.
It's pretty blatant. Let's keep going, man. Let's keep going. 1995, you had I love this song too. You had Adina Howard, Freak Like Me. I want a freak in the morning, a freak in the evening.
See, this is junior high for me.
Now, mind you, I like most of these songs, but it doesn't mean that I agree with what they promote. I don't agree with many of the things that I have done in my own past. Now, you know, we're going to end with the 2000s was just like, you know, we just open now. We just open. No funny stuff when I say that. But you got 2006, Shauna, Getting Some Head. Getting Some Head. Actually, when I reached the rap, I actually had a little freestyle to that. But and it was kind of hot. But again, like, how much more blatant can you get? 2009, yeah, you got Young Money. I want to F every girl in the world.
I don't even remember that song.
You don't remember that song? I wish I could love every girl in the world.
Who was
Drake
that featuring?
Drake. All of
wow.
them. Young Money.
Wow.
Not you want to F every girl in the world? Everyone? Everyone. So if you can see this, if you can see what we tabulated here and enumerated this from 1963, where you have Jack Jones from Wine and Lovers, where he's crafting a very subtle sexual message in a very tactful way, up to 2009. You know, I want to F every girl in the world. So just wanted to bring that up and talk about it. Maybe we could touch on this whenever we come back from the messages. I definitely want to know more about what you think, and I definitely want you all to stay with us. So we're going to take a brief break, and we'll be right back after these messages.
We're back for the power of perspective, and we're touching on decency, respect, and tact. Not necessarily in that order, and we're just trying to get to the bottom of things. How did it get, I don't want to say this bad, but how did we get to the point where we're no longer knocking? We just kicking down the door with just indecency, profanity, and if you don't like it, so what? I'm not saying that, but that's what the media, that's what television, and that's what music has given us today.
Well, based on our conversation that we ended on before we took our last break, you know, we had enumerated some songs out from the 60s up until now, and it just really showed, you know, how decency, respect, and tact has really gone by the wayside to the point where, like, the floodgates are open right now, and people can say and do whatever they want to. I've been guilty around being around some of my friends' kids whenever we were in our early 20s, and you know, it's like we cuss around the kids. Like, some things we do today, we don't recognize that these only have detrimental effects. So as we bring this show to kind of an end, man, I wanted to just talk about maybe how the movie industry and the music industry, and we can also weave in other aspects as well, but a biopic came out recently of Tupac, All Eyes on Me. I did a blog response to it. I thought it was a great movie in the sense that it was written well. I don't know if it's true or not. It was cast well. It looked very professional, but it highlighted it brilliantly and serendipitously highlighted, probably accidentally, issues that I think are very unfortunate. 1994 should not look just like 2017. There's been no growth, no improvement. Yes, we've had improvement with devices and technology, but in terms of social culture, cultural norms, there's been almost no growth. If anything, there's been a decline. So what are some of your thoughts in terms of just, as we continue the conversation in this aspect, what are some of your thoughts in terms of like how movies and music has related to this or contributed to it?
Well, and I don't want to speak for all the elders who may be viewing our show today, but, I have to give them a lot of credit when it comes to, everybody's not ready for certain television shows and everybody's not ready for certain music. And I used to roll my eyes and I used to say things like, they're tripping, or, video games don't have nothing to do with, the violence that might be out here. Mm-hmm. And necessarily that is the case for me. Mm-hmm. I'm not talking about just myself. I'm talking about our culture. I'm talking about our generation. Now looking in hindsight, I understand that there is, and I hope I can touch on this, that there is a spiritual warfare. Some people aren't ready to indulge on certain music. They're not ready for that. Certain lyrics touch different people in certain ways. You just went through a whole list from 1963 to 2009 that pretty much the majority of the songs was saying all the same thing.
All the same thing.
But 2009, it was just like no more knock, as I said when I opened up the segment. No more knocking on the door. Right. We just kicking it in like a SWAT team, and we gonna cuss everybody out. Mm-hmm. We don't care if babies is in the room. We don't care if the elderlies is in there with their walkers.
True.
We're gonna talk about sex, profanity, blowing somebody's brains out. Yeah. Now, at 32 years old, I can definitely understand that, there should be some type of spiritual balance, that maybe you want to turn down that 3-6 Mafia, or in today's day, maybe you don't want to be listening to Future before you have to go into your SAT exam. Maybe you don't want to listen to Nicki Minaj before you're actually going to go out on your first date with that young man that you got introduced to at the church choir, from the church choir. Nicki Minaj might not be what you want to listen to, Anaconda. Because there's certain cadences, there's certain subliminal messages, I'm serious when I say this, that might be telling you to do certain things. Right. Now, somebody might watch this and say, oh, that's just music, Mr. BJ, or BJ, you corny. I totally understand that. But I'm not talking to that girl who already knows how to balance her own spirituality in moderation. Mm-hmm. She knows when to turn it down. She knows when to turn it off. Right. She knows when to put on an instrumental or some classical music, or no music at all. Because she's already preparing herself for battle. And I'm talking about spiritual battle.
You know why? Excellent point you bring up. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but because she has what I call a healthy spiritual immune system, right? When your biological immune system, what does it do? It fights off stuff that are unhealthy. It fights off things that could possibly damage your well-being. Your white blood cells are like your soldiers, and you have to have the same type of a spiritual immune system. So I may listen. Trust me, me and BJ, we're not, like you said, we're not spring chickens anymore, but we're not old guys. And we're not necessarily, like, we're talking about this at 32 years old, but we've been talking about this since we was in our early 20s. It ain't like we 65 or in our 50s reflecting like, we really messed up in our 20s. No, we still young, talking about behaviors that we might have just been doing 6-7 years ago. To that point, we can still listen to things, and our spiritual immune system has the ability to kick out what's not healthy for us. So if I'm listening to Jeezy or Weezy, or I'm listening to,
or any other Easy,
any other Easy, I could probably listen to it, but my spiritual immune system, like this example female that you said, flushes out stuff that has no business in my life.
And us as coaches and as therapists and as parents and as older brothers, metaphorically, or actually family members, we have to set the stage for that next generation. Now, with that being said, earlier I gave homage and I paid respects to our elderly. But that generation who might be in their 40s, their late 40s, and I'm not talking to all of our viewers out there, but you can relate to what I'm about to say. They set up the stage for us kind of rough. They didn't necessarily care. So, to some of our conscious listeners out there, it's not going to be a sudden change overnight. You can forget that. But, I hope that they take something out of this, saying that, am I setting the stage for the young men and young women in my life that, maybe I need to at least prepare them. There has to be preparation. You was talking about the dining room talks and the kitchen talks. Talk to them. Ask them where they're at. Ask them about the lyrics they're listening to. I think that some of the individuals that were ahead of me was just saying all that music's whack. When we were listening to the No Limits and the Jay-Z's, but they never took time to ask us, well, what that mean. I'm not necessarily talking about my household either, because I did have two parents that said, well, let me listen to it. And then we reflected. We need that back again. Let's meet halfway. You know, spiritually speaking, you know, they try to say, and I shouldn't say they try to say, it's in the word that we're supposed to be, you know, a body of Christ. And I'm speaking of that. Well, the body can't work without the head needs the arm needs the heart, and all these other things. And metaphorically speaking, if the elderly is the head of our body, and we're the arms, take time to listen to us when we telling you that we're hurting. And what I'm trying to say is, because I don't want to make it too detailed, we need to listen to you all about how it was, but it's up to us to listen to that next generation to tell us how it is.
How it is, yes.
And I may not understand what mask off means by future. But little Kanasia and little Treyana and little Jamie and little, you know, James and such, they can tell me. And yes, I may still think it's whack. But let me take time to reflect. I think we're just ignoring it. And then before you know it, it just blows up in our face that, you know, we're in 2017. Shawn left off at 2009. He didn't even begin to tell you 2012 and up. And we're about to go into 2018, and I'm sure we can find several songs where it's just, you know, they just telling you now what it is.
What it is.
And I don't necessarily even have a problem with that. I myself like to know when the train's about to crash. I don't need to find out, you know, I don't want to find out at the last minute. So if I see something coming, let me try to prepare them that, you know, if you listen to this every day, what is it telling you?
Right.
Is it just entertainment?
Right.
Is there some type of spiritual influence?
Right.
Is the cadences doing something for you?
Right.
Is this healthy?
Right.
You know, all of that has to come into context, and you have to take it as a case by case. You know, a woman may listen to a certain song and get a whole different vibe than that young man does. Yeah. But it's up to us, because we're on the stage right now as the adults. How are you preparing them for the next act coming up? Or you just going to trash the stage and then be like, okay, it's your turn?
Man, you know, BJ's being very, I think BJ's being very hopeful, right? BJ's being very hopeful right now. And I think that, you know, I think that the next 10, 15, 20 years or so, sometimes things get worse before it gets better. My opinion is that it could get better, because I'm kind of thinking that hip-hop and pop music can actually take a turn, and actually it could be literally become cool to be smart. I'm not sure if that's going to happen or not. I think it's more likely that we're going to get a continuation of this, you know, wired, maladaptive, counterproductive music. And it's so unfortunate, because it ain't like 1980 or 1990 where, like, our mom and dad could talk to us about that tactful music, Marvin Gaye. They'd be like, Shawn, who's Jada Kiss? That ain't no real music. Put on this Marvin Gaye, you know, put on this Whitney Houston. Now we're getting into an era where we're going to be comparing artists who are both tactless. You know, I think Lonzo Ball and T.I. just got into it on social media about Nas. I love Nas, you know what I'm saying? However, what is going to happen? Like, what's the day going to be like where you got a parent, a father, and a son talking about, yo, Lil DMX ain't or Lil Vert ain't nothing. DMX is, you know, DMX. You know what I'm saying? And I like DMX too. But what I'm trying to say is that the artist, the persona, the energy, the spirituality of the artist has changed. And DMX and Nas are two people that people would say that these are two of the better ones. But we still can't disguise and ignore the fact that they have a lot of counterproductive music as well. How much counterproductive music did a Marvin Gaye or Whitney Houston put out? They probably put out a couple tracks, but was it to the extent that it was like every album was counterproductive? I think it's going to be a dangerous time. I'm not necessarily as hopeful as you are that the music is going to change, because you're going to be comparing artists that are kind of like similar and are still invested in that counterproductive music, if I'm making any sense. So with that said, you know, I just want to see if you have any final thoughts, BJ. I'll leave the people just with, you know, the idea and concept that I was talking about having a healthy spiritual immune system. I don't hate this music. I like hip hop. I'm not in love with it. I don't love it like I used to. But my spiritual immune system is so strong now that I can I can listen to a Jeezy, you know what I'm saying? I can listen to a Cardi B, a Nicki, you know, a Weezy, a Drake. And if they say things and are doing things that aren't commensurate and parallel to my life, I flush it out. The problem is that a lot of people aren't as strong as me, spiritually, soulfully, and just in their own being. Be strong and be powerful internally, externally, spiritually, in terms of your whole well-being.
And I'm going to leave, excuse me, on this note. The first lady of my church always said, swallow the meat and throw out the bones. So whether we're talking movies, we're talking DVDs, which are movies that go on sale, or we're talking music. You know, you could take positive lyrics like Shawn just said from all of them, but you don't have to take it in to the point where you're trying to relive these lyrics and trying to walk around and try to mimic these individuals, these artists, these entertainers or actors, etc. That's who they are. They're there to entertain. They're there to, make you feel good. They're there to make you feel certain vibes, as Shawn lists all the music. But you don't have to necessarily take it all in and try to relive, or more important, mimic what they're telling you to do. So my only thing is this, before we leave, I just hope our viewers took time to, one, pay attention to the power of the dining room talk, and more important, the power of communication as a family unit. Everyone who knows me knows that I love sports and I love being a team player. The first team you learn how to play with is the family. So if nothing less, even from what he and I are talking about right now, I just hope our viewers took time to pay attention to, the power of communication, whether it's for good or bad. Let's put it all on the table, metaphorically speaking, and let's sort it out. Everybody's not going to agree. There's going to be some different opinions, and that's just how we live. But I don't want our viewers to walk away from this and thinking that we're just trying to crush their music and talk this and that. That's how life is, man. We're all individuals. That's what makes us God's creatures and makes us creative. So with that being said, I just want to sign off and say thank you for watching. And my name is BJ Tench.
And my name is Shawn Francis-Coleman. And this is the Power of Perspective, the talk show. Take care. Peace.
Bruh. We could have talked for hours on that straight first take on the